chair of this committee. The idea is to examine and try to listen to both the public and to the Sheriff's Department with regard to the police strategies and policies that they have. My plan is to have everyone hear what the department is doing, where they stand on issues. As you know, this is all came about because the governor issued an edict that indicated that each municipality that has a law enforcement part needed to do a review of their programs and policies. We followed it up. It was followed up by a rather thick manual of the kinds of issues that need to be discussed and going over. And that I've given that to the members of the panel. I'm sure they've read every word and understand each one completely. It's difficult to do this sort of thing because it's simply complicated. There's a lot of issues that deal with policing and police departments. So that everybody's clear, this doesn't involve the county jail. That's a totally different area and not involved with regard to what this committee is supposed to do. Just so that everybody knows who's here, maybe we could have them introduce themselves, starting with Rachel. Rochelle? I'll get it right.
It's okay. Rochelle Gregory, Director of Community Services.
Andrew Wiley, Clinton County District Attorney.
Mark Henry, Chair, Clinton County Legislature.
Dave Murchison, citizen.
Jamie Martinell, Clinton County Public Defender.
And we have,
Calvin Castine, Public Safety Committee.
we're missing two people. One is the head of the Magistrates Association. Clinton County is not present. And one other member of the county legislature, Mr. Rosenquist, is part of the committee, and he may show up. I haven't heard that he isn't going to show up. So, what I plan on doing is having our sheriff describe and present a program dealing with his policies and the status of the department as it stands today. My idea is that this might answer some questions before we have to, without having to go through a whole process. At least we have what the status of the department is presently. It doesn't mean we can't change it. It doesn't mean we can't suggest different methodologies, but it's a place to start. So with that, I give the floor to the sheriff.
Thank you.
Welcome everybody, good evening. Thank you for taking the opportunity to join us this evening. As Judge McGill said, it's a very complicated, complex matter. This is not something that is going to be solved with one presentation. It's not an issue that can be resolved with one answer. Unfortunately, what basically got us to this point is some really bad incidents that happen across the country that are painting law enforcement agencies with one broad brush. Now we have to be able to articulate why are we doing things appropriately. So that's what we're hoping to be able to lay out for you this evening. Now, if I pause for a minute, some of you are probably thinking, I can hear music in the background. Anybody notice that?
Yeah.
Anybody know who that is? You got it. That's why he's here. I knew you'd do that. Okay, does anybody know the story behind this? What's going on? That's a question we all have to ask ourselves. We have to start with saying, what the heck is going on? Some bad policing, some bad circumstances, and also some small snippets from the media being put out that we can't make an assessment. I first would like to ask everybody here to not be a judge in any of these situations with what we get an opportunity to view, because we don't get an opportunity to view the whole incident. Not even so much of what took place seconds before, or what transpired seconds after, or what was the cause for the stop or the arrest, but there's an awful lot more to it than that. I'm hoping tonight to be able to give everybody here a clear opportunity of what it's like to be in our shoes, what it's like to be in police officers' shoes, so that you can thoroughly understand how difficult these situations are. I have been sitting at the opposite end of the barrel of a gun several times in my career with threats of being shot. I know what it's like. I've been in violent, threatening, deadly situations. I've also been at the administrative end of this, where we have sat down and tried to pull the pieces together on a fatal shooting situation and how it significantly impacts that police officer. I cannot even begin to imagine any human being going to work that day, being excited thinking they're going to shoot somebody, or they're going to take another human's life. I can't even begin to fathom that. And I don't believe that's been the case across the country. It gets portrayed that way in certain areas, and I'm not going to assess those. And you're going to hear this a couple times. You know, I'm glad we have the DA with us, because he'll be the first to tell you some of these critical cases, you know, people, and I'm sure Mr. Wiley, people have asked, oh, what'd you think about this case, or what do you think about that case? You can't make that assessment. But worse yet, how can we judge and assess actions of another individual with a 15-second video snippet? It takes district attorneys, prosecutors, judges, days, weeks, months, sometimes years to come to the proper resolve of a case. And society is asking the cop to make that decision in seconds. That's an unsurmountable challenge, but real cops are up to it, because real cops are there for the people. This is about policing. This is about making our community a better place, a safer community. At the end of the day, that's the mission. It doesn't change. It's not about race. It's not about gender. It's not about your own personal beliefs. It's about good, solid policing. And there's a big difference. We'll show you a little bit with that. I'm going to apologize up front. I'm not used to giving any types of presentation with the assistance of computer-aided technology. So if I'm off course from what that shows, you'll understand why. But with me this evening is the Chief of the Clinton County Sheriff's Patrol Division, Major Nick Leon. I think everybody in the audience is probably aware of him, familiar with him. He's going to be assisting with a lot of the presentation when we get down to issues of force, deadly physical force, and also defense tactics. He is an instructor in the local academies, been an instructor for our department for several years, and somebody who has had hands-on in many different situations. I'd also like to mention, as we start off, one thing that we will see that is a little bit different. Every 4 years, my policies get reviewed. Every 4 years, the general public has an opportunity to say, you're racist, your guys are violent, they're too mean, they're not doing their job, and have an opportunity to put somebody else in the position. Unlike chiefs of police, municipal police chiefs are generally assigned by the mayor, appointed by the mayor and by a council. They answer to the mayor and to the council. No disrespect to my colleagues in the legislature, I do not answer to them. I will listen to them, we will work together by all means, but I answer to the people in this community. My department answers to the people in this community. And as you'll see, the policies and procedures that we have put into place have been very valuable and have aided us in providing the best service to the residents in Clinton County while maintaining professionalism and maintaining the guidelines that the governor and his team is asking us to be able to follow. Okay?
I got ESPN, sir.
You got ESPN? Good. That's what I want. It's the network piece I'm worried about. Okay, Section 650 of the Consolidated Laws, County Article 17, General Duties of the Sheriff. Sheriff's responsibilities are significantly different than a police chief. Therefore, sheriff's offices, and I want to correct that, by the way, those of you that say Clinton County Sheriff's Department, it's Clinton County Sheriff's Office. We're not a department. You know, highway department, Those are departments within county government. The sheriff's office is a separate elected office, just like the district attorney's office, just like the Clinton County Treasurer's office. They're offices, they're not departments. So I'll clarify that. But the duties that we have, basically, we have an awful lot more responsibility than what municipal police departments do, in that we are obligated to do many other duties that they're not obligated to do. With we have civil obligations, civil papers, we seize property, we do income executions, we do custody situations, we serve thousands of civil documents, especially this year with all of the health regulations with COVID, but we serve thousands of civil documents. If you do your research, you will find one of the top 2 risks to sheriff's deputies for losing their life is serving civil process. Everybody says it's domestic violence. Yes, that is a high risk. Serving civil process. Somebody knows they're getting evicted. Somebody knows that you're going to be seizing their vehicle, or you're taking their cash register. They'll meet you with a weapon. And a lot of officers lose their life on the doorstep serving a civil process. That's something that other police departments do not have to deal with. The state police do not have to deal with. So we have to be aware of those issues as well. We also maintain the sex offender registry as part of our obligations in the county. Many other things that we do as well. As far as our policies for force and how we deploy those policies, I'll let the major talk about that in just a moment, but I think it's important that you understand that you cannot just teach somebody how to do something and expect them to do it every day. So by going to a police academy doesn't make you a cop. By sitting there through training, no matter who it's instructed by, does not make you a cop. You need the road skills, you need experience, but you also have to have, with the teach component, you have to have a preach component. They call it teaching and preaching. They get the teaching in the academy and the various courses, but they have to have the routine preaching. Myself, the major, the lieutenant, other supervisors in the road patrol unit attend shift briefings, meet officers, meet deputies in the hallway, the parking lot, different opportunities to talk to them, and basically to preach over and over about what's going on, what we're seeing in society today, what's happening in society today. And part of that is, guys, remember, you've gotten the legal teaching. You understand what's happening. Everybody has a camera. That camera in law enforcement is your friend if you're doing your job, if you're following the policy, and you're using good application of those policies along with the laws that you have been taught. By preaching that over and over, our people, I believe, have a good understanding that, okay, let's follow the rules, let's follow the policies. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of policies of every department, particularly ours. We're not going to get into all of them tonight, but I do want to cover a couple regarding use of force and regarding some of the governing methods that we have. I won't be disclosing a lot. Some of them obviously involve safety factors, where you don't want the general public to have a heads up on some of your tactical responses, for example. But as far as basics on use of force and how you deploy the use of force, there's no secrecy there. That's totally transparent. It's governed an awful lot by New York State law. Some of the changes that came about, we'll talk about in just a moment, actually existed in the laws before. We just have to call them something different now, but we'll deal with that. I think we're good with this one. I'm just going to cover a mission statement. I was elected to the position of sheriff in 2002. I started January 1st, 2003. Shortly thereafter, I was searching for what the mission statement was of our patrol division. The patrol division was recently removed from the jail, kind of without a mission, without equipment, without any type of a plan. So we started restructuring all of that. So basically from January 2003 to present, we have built and developed and grown into the department that we are today. And our mission statement is pretty simple. It's the mission of the Clinton County Sheriff's Office to promote safety and quality of life in Clinton County by providing service with pride and commitment to excellence in partnership with our community. Partnership. That's something that the governor wants us to do in his charge. He thinks law enforcement agencies should partner with their community to make it a safer community. Absolutely. Couldn't agree even more. We started it with a mission statement that clearly states that's what we're going to do. That is part of our mission. We cannot be successful in any police agency, in any jurisdiction, without the thorough support and trust of the community we serve. Now, does that mean every single person is going to tell you unequivocally always that, oh, the Sheriff's Department is absolutely great, I trust them 110%, and they're... No, you're going to have those people that have had a not-so-nice outcome, but I would be willing to assure you that they'll tell you they had a pretty good experience. Now, getting arrested is not a great thing. Nobody's going to like it. But there's several ways that that can unfold for you. And it can unfold so that it can be a pretty traumatic, horrifying event. Or it can unfold to say, I did something wrong, I made a bad choice, but you know what? Your folks were pretty cool about it. They could have made things an awful lot worse. I wanted to bring tonight, but I knew we didn't have a couple days on our hand to go through this. But I have folders and folders and folders of thank you letters, cards. We just recently got a really nice letter from a family and a mass card because their daughter had recently passed. And our officers had responded and investigated the incident. And cutting it short at the end, she said, your people were so compassionate and so caring, I felt that they would have wanted one of my daughter's mass cards. They took the time to write the letter and thank us for that. That states volumes. Now, is every case like that? I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that we're perfect because we're not. But the nice thing about us, we learn every day and we apply what we learn to make our community a better place. If we can all do that, we can all be successful, we can better achieve the goals that we need to achieve to be able to resolve some of the problems that our society is seeing right now. Okay, basically this is the geographic jurisdiction of the Sheriff's Office. It's 1,187 square miles, and I will tell you, since January of 2003, it has taken me an awful long time. I came from the Plattsburgh Police Department, where I was responsible for patrolling 5.2 square miles. And when I look at the county map now, I can cover that jurisdiction with my thumb. So there's an awful lot more roads, there's an awful lot more communities that we need to reach out to, we need to be sensitive to, and we need to be able to address everybody's needs. That includes 79 miles of shoreline, 34 miles of international border with Canada. I talked earlier about some of our functions being the civil documents that we serve, maintaining a sex offender registry, enforcing federal, state, and local laws. Being along a border and being your first law enforcement agency along the border is a big deal. And it should mean a lot to everybody who is a resident of Clinton County. There's an awful lot of activity, both sides going back and forth across the border. We've partnered with federal agencies several times. We've partnered with Border Patrol on many, many, many details, one of which one of our deputies actually apprehended somebody walking on a back road and stopped to talk to the individual, see where they were going, if they were lost, what was happening. Just had that something doesn't feel right in his stomach when he drove away after. And in looking into this individual, he was wanted from a 12-year-old, I believe a 12-year-old armed rape of a young lady in Connecticut. And she has been living a nightmare since then because he just up and disappeared and avoided prosecution. And I'm sure every single night in her mind as she closed her eyes, she's wondering, is he on the other side of the door? Is he outside my home? She no longer has to worry about that. That's what good policing can produce for us. That's how we make our community a safer place. You'll see in the governor's booklet what he thinks good police departments should be doing to engage their community and to truly work for their community. Part of that is various programs that he says should happen in there. He specifically cites, and this is kind of a novel idea for those of you who know me, maybe uniformed police officers should go in schools and even sit down and read stories to the younger kids. Yeah, I've been doing that for over 30 years, and I've had a great time. Best part of my career. Being able to go in and explain to young students what the uniform means. These are not weapons. Teachers, adults, parents, people on the street will say, oh, that's the policeman's weapons. No, they're not. These are tools. This is my carpenter's belt. Every tool serves a different purpose and is used in a unique fashion to get the task done. But then I always challenge them and ask the kids, what is the most powerful tool that a law enforcement officer possesses? Do you have any idea? Most people will say the gun, maybe the baton. It's the brain. It's the brain. It can get you out of any type of situation with good, clear, logical thinking. And every time I say that, I get this vision in my head. And this is going to stay with you folks the rest of your life, so I'm going to apologize up front. Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop. Okay, the guy's brilliant if you stop and think about it. You have to put yourself in that situation and figure out, how do I diffuse this situation in the least lethal way without having to get involved in a confrontation involving weapons. These tools are the last thing that I want to utilize, but they are very critical to protect my life and to protect other people's lives. Some of the programs that we offer at Clinton County Sheriff's Office, DARE program. I started the DARE program with my partner at the time, Kirk Tobrock, when I was in the Plattsburgh City Police Department, and we started that in 1990. I brought the program to the Sheriff's Office a couple years later through Under Sheriff Reg Dermody at the time, and he got an officer going, and they started teaching it, and we've continued and grown the program to the point that we have taught the DARE program to every 5th grade in the city of Plattsburgh. Parochial schools, city schools, all the county schools, any quadrant of the community, we have taught the DARE program to. So there's been consistency, there's been that interaction, there's been that uniformed officer going in the schools talking about things. We have been able to get information about bad situations that we've been able to resolve before it actually became an event through the schools, working in partnership with families and working in partnership with school administrations. Critical. Safe Child ID is one of our programs. We produce thousands of ID cards for young children and families. Project Lifesaver program, great program. For those of you not familiar, that's where we put it's like a watch on somebody with, it could be with autism, or it could be an elderly person with dementia, and the family fears that they're going to wander off in the middle of the night, and they could lose that individual. The individual could get seriously injured, or worse. Been a great program. We've had a good save off it fairly recently. I think it was back in June that we were acknowledged for having a save of a young individual. That's great. We have the Yellow Dot Special Needs Program for the elderly, for senior citizens. We do the No Shave November for St. Jude's, and we've also rolled that in now into December, where we do a Santa beard competition with our people, and I think it's just because they don't want to shave any longer. So, but they still give me $30 more, and they can go an additional month without shaving. But that money for the last 3 or 4 years, we have donated to NAMI, a mental health organization, to be able to help them provide good programs in our community. We've done Coffee with a Cop for a couple years. The holiday train that we brought back up to Rouse's Point, we went down to the Capital District, down to Albany, and met with the people down there, so that the train now starts up in Rouse's Point instead of ends in Rouse's Point, and our kids get kind of what's left, which is better than nothing, but now it starts up here, so it's really exciting, really good program. We do the Toys for Tots, Shop with a Cop. I think that's my favorite time of year. You know, our people, I gotta boast for just a minute, but to be able to go out into the schools and ask the school personnel who needs some help, what family needs a pick-me-up and needs a lift. And I don't have the statistics at the top of my head, but last year I want to say we did like 40 kids, in the vicinity of 40, maybe a little bit more, and we spent $200-300 on each kid. The kid actually goes with a uniformed police officer, you know, wearing a Santa hat on, and spending that time and sharing that time with that uniformed officer. Again, having an opportunity to talk and get more involved, and a lot of young people have thought it was really cool and saying, you know, I might want to be a cop someday. That's what you're hoping for, that you can build an interest, that we can build respect. RESPECT, okay? It's more than just a song. That's something that we have really started to see erode the last decade. And it starts with law enforcement. I keep hearing the question, I don't want to get into media assessments, but I keep hearing the question, oh, what are we going to tell our children? All of these beatings and these shootings, it's a horrible thing to see. I got a crazy idea. How about we tell them, follow the direction of the police officer for now and we'll fight it later. If you're being wrongfully arrested, if the officer was rude to you, whatever the case may be, but if they say, put your hands on your steering wheel, and they give you a clear command, it's not, put your hands on your steering wheel. If they say stop, stop. These things are pretty simple commands, but I will tell you, I'm probably one of the first elected people you've heard say that, because a lot of people don't want to say it. They don't want to stand up and say, people need to listen. But it's the truth. They need to listen. We can sort anything out. Communications is a great thing, but it needs to start with that. And that right now is one of the few protections that police officers feel they have, is being able to have people put your hands where we can see them. Breast Cancer Awareness Walk we've done, the Special Olympics, we've done parades for every community throughout the county. It's showing here 212. That's fairly accurate. I think I've led all but 8 or 9 of those parades. Best opportunity ever, because I can go to every corner of the county and be able to talk with people, find out what their needs are, what their issues are, and make necessary changes within our department to help them out. We've had Junior Deputy of the Year. We bring a young individual in from the 5th grade DARE program. We select their name out of a hat in a little competition that they have, and that person gets to be a deputy for the day, and they go on patrol, and they actually participate in different investigations. They go out on the boat and see what a marine rescue is like. They get to see what it's like to be a police officer and to have to make some of these critical decisions. Great experience for the youth in our community. We do an awful lot of the child passenger safety seat inspections. We're an inspection station right at the sheriff's office. We do different details throughout the community at different businesses, different government entities, to be able to make sure that our young passengers are safe as well, so that we don't lose anybody. We also now have a medical drop box in the lobby of the jail, so that people that may come in to visit, if they know that they're going to visit a family member, and that family member may have a substance abuse addiction problem, rather than say, what do I do with this stuff? They're just going to come home and they're going to get back into my medicine cabinet. I don't need it anymore. They can come in, they can drop it right into the secure box. We take hundreds of pounds a year out of that box that we lawfully destroy with DEA. We're going to get into accreditation of policies. Accreditation of policies is something that I wanted to do several years ago, and at the time it was Major Michael Reed, who has recently retired, who started the process. He's been at it for over 4 years. It is a grueling process that details all of your policies and procedures of the department, right down to the point of interviews. How do you conduct interviews? Having consistent written questions with the written replies kept and folded, the documentation to prove, not just get a stamp or a certificate and say, oh, we're accredited, hang it on the wall and forget about it. Your policies have to be enforced, they have to be properly utilized, and they have to be reviewed. Accreditation is a progressive and contemporary way of helping police agencies evaluate and improve their overall performance. It provides formal recognition that an organization meets or exceeds general expectations of quality in the field. Accreditation acknowledges the implementation of policies that are conceptually sound and operationally effective. Again, it does us no good to have a policy book and stick it on the shelf and forget about it. We have to implement it, we have to use it, and then for accreditation and annual reviews, you have to make sure that you can show when you come in and get audited that your policies have been utilized and that you are maintaining the necessary documentation. The New York State accreditation process became operational in 1989 and encompasses 4 principal goals. Basically, to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of law enforcement agencies utilizing existing personnel, equipment, and facilities to the extent possible. To promote increased cooperation and coordination among law enforcement agencies and other agencies in criminal justice services. To ensure the appropriate training of law enforcement personnel and to promote public confidence in law enforcement agencies. Is that not one of the reasons why we're here? Because the governor passed this edict and said, we need to evaluate our police agencies. This accreditation process is done through DCJS, the Division of Criminal Justice Services, which is under the auspice of the governor of the state of New York. If we're following these guidelines and we have accredited policies that are reviewed and that are approved through the Division of Criminal Justice Services, we should be doing what we're supposed to be doing. Long, grueling process, very time-consuming process. Major Leon has picked that task up and he's overseeing it with people under his direction to complete the process and get our evaluation very soon. Absent COVID, I think we probably would have been ready for an evaluation in June. That was our time frame. This kicked us back just a little bit. Let's see. Since 2016, our policies have been redone for the purpose of the accreditation. And again, every time we do interviews, anytime we do any process, we make sure that the support documentation goes in those folders so that when we get an annual evaluation, we can show and we can justify what we've been doing and how we've been doing it to make sure that we're following the process. Okay. You want to pick this one up? I'm going to have some coffee and I'll have my stunt double take over.
That's a much better looking stuff, I would say.
Well, that's the way I do it. That's why you pay me.
All right, folks, Major Leon, this next video we wanted to play because it puts everything in perspective for you. You're listening to us talk about what it is we do, and it's pretty generic. We're police officers. But the question is not so much what we do, because for us, the sheriff, myself, this is more of a chance for us to showcase our agency. For me personally, the people that wear our patch, we're proud of what it is we do. We do a good job. So being in line, the fact that we've been seeking accreditation, I believe you're going to find that our policies are above board, and when you go back on this, you're going to have some good recommendations, but you're going to find the policies are going to meet that standard, Executive Order 203. Some of the things that you may not understand or look at is what is policing and what does it mean to you. This video was done probably about a year or two ago, but it gives you perspective, and that's really what we want while you're looking this stuff over. We can go back here and see if Todd actually can run first. What you saw in the video is what most of you in here know. I mean, your careers in law enforcement, your careers in working as judges, is what we do as police officers, we get a fraction of a second. And it's quick. And it's muscle memory. It's based on training. It's based on your perception. It's based on what you're seeing and what you're processing. And we make a decision. And sometimes that decision is a matter of life and death for us and those we deal with. The flip side of that is it takes Mr. Wiley and his people and the defense and the general public weeks and months to pick that apart. And we get a snapshot in time to make that decision. We've all looked at the videos, we've all watched people, we've seen the people, the shootings, and we say, the most cautious reserve to make judgment because you want all the information. How many times have you seen the news, you've seen something where something's come out and you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. That guy needs to be fired. And then 3 days later, you see a little piece in the paper somewhere, or a little ending of a news article that says, oh yeah, by the way, that subject also did this, and that's what caused it. It's a footnote. It's a fraction of a second. Watching that video, he was clear. That cop needed to be fired, that cop was wrong, and yes, we're held to a higher standard, right? We go through training. We're supposed to be better. We're supposed to be skilled. We're supposed to use our tools. But what people tend to forget is we're also human beings. Nobody in this room is perfect. Every day, 1,000%. We strive to be. Sometimes that may not happen. But we do everything that we can to protect society and ourselves. So the boss earlier wanted to talk about tasers. And do you have that prepped up there or no? Your question on the tasers?
I don't want to get into an awful lot of individual dialogue about the various tools. I don't think that, I've been thinking about this for weeks. What do we need to present? What do we need people to understand? And we literally could take weeks, standing up here 8 hours a day for probably 2 solid weeks. You know, judges, I know you can't. But to be able to give you a full understanding of what it is like and the responsibility that you have. Public safety, it's on your back. It's you. If you've got a crowd of 50 people or 100 people and you're alone, you have to deal with it. You can't run from it. There's people that are counting on you. You are carrying tools that are capable of taking somebody else's life, but if taken away from you, are capable of taking your life. Then of which you obviously are rendered totally useless, and now become more of a liability to the community that you're serving. We've seen the last several weeks cases of police officers involved in physical altercations wherein a taser was taken from them. One moment they're saying it's not a deadly weapon, next moment they're saying it's a deadly weapon. That goes back to what the Major and I said several times already. It takes our DA, it takes lawyers and judges sometimes days, weeks, or months to be able to actually lay out a good fact pattern in what happened. We have seconds to decide that. Okay? And with tasers, I don't want to get into it an awful lot because of the time that is involved, but I do want to just refresh everybody's memory. The Clinton County Sheriff's Office shared in a very tragic moment in December of 2012, and where one of our deputies was involved in a fatal shooting of a resident in Clinton County. I'm here to tell you personally, and you'll hear it in my voice, that was one hell of a traumatic moment. Not just for me. When I got that call, I was from 911. I do not remember the trip from my house in Peru to Altona. I don't remember a thing about it. Seems like I was just there. A lot of things going through your mind. First and foremost, stabilizing the scene. Is your guy okay? As we analyzed that and digested it, and I'm going to say conservatively, I personally have watched that video over 200 times. Conservative. To try and find out what can we do differently. Now, we talked about, well, should we bring it, should we not bring it? And I said, no, that's not really necessary for the purpose of tonight's discussion, but you need to thoroughly have an understanding that what we see from the media at times is that, no offense, but is that one little blurb that's exciting, that's going to draw people to it. Clinton County Sheriff's deputy shoots a guy in his own home. That deputy, thank God, was trained by somebody that really cared about what he was doing, and a lot of thought went into that training. We were the first law enforcement agency in Clinton County to start carrying tasers. Okay, they are a less than lethal force. We carry our taser a lot differently than other departments do. Most departments, you'll see troopers and PD, they carry them more towards the front of their belt, and if they're right-handed, their gun is right there on the right side. Left-handed, obviously, the left-hand side. We've also seen in the media where police officers meant to draw the taser, grabbed the gun by mistake, and strong hands side by side, and they shot somebody. I didn't mean it, I didn't mean it. You can't have those mistakes. You just can't live with those things. We train and we draw our taser with our opposite hand. If I'm right-handed, I draw with my left hand. There's no mistake. There's no mistake. It does add a thought process when you go from this to this, which is a good thing. But thank God, we train over and over, and we have committed people that do a good job with our training to be able to train the deputy that was involved in this case back in December of 2012. Because had it been a strong-arm draw, he would not have had time to be able to drop the taser and draw his weapon. It was that fast. It was 6.2 seconds where he actually drew with the left hand and then had to draw with the right hand. And he was that close to near death. He was being attacked by a well-trained veteran who also came at him with a knife and was heading right for his neck. And it's not somebody who's poking at you like this. When somebody comes at you in a particular stance, it's different. It's a lot different. Very sad event, very traumatic event for us, for the community. That fortunately we had the training with it. The tasers have proven to be a good resource in some cases, but they're not the end-all, do-all. Many people need to understand that. There has been a portrayal that, 1,002 people in 2019 died or were shot with a taser and died afterwards. Out of that, 143 had complications directly from the taser. And I think it's down even to single numbers that actually died as a result of it. So it's very, very few. But what's the alternative? So that's what we look for. We're always looking for alternatives. That's kind of all I want to stick with tasers. I don't want to go off on that.
So real quick, originally we were going to hand out policies to you guys, but we found that it was going to be too difficult, and we certainly didn't want to let go of those. Obviously, policies are under review. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the main policy, which concerns most of you, which is our use of force policy. And this explains why it is that, we're able to withhold certain policies and things that give away tactics and put officers in danger should it get out. General dispersals are not going to be done, but anybody who's part of this group or wants to, you can see me after, and we will make a time that works for me and you can come down and you can look at whatever policies you want. We'll sit there, we'll talk, have coffee. You'll bring the coffee, hopefully. If not, I guess I'll go get it. But this way you can have a chance to read it and not have to rush through it. This is our use of force policy. 08044 in its entirety is listed here. The bulk of this policy comes down to the penal law, Article 35. That judges the use of force and the justification of the use of force for citizens and police officers. Law enforcement agencies must recognize and respect the value and dignity of every person. That's it. If you can do that, you're set. We understand policing is sometimes not pretty. We know that, right? Sometimes bad people, they don't want to go to jail. I mean, Mr. Martin, you defend some people, and sometimes they might not be the best people. Good people, bad choices, but they may not want to go to jail. So we sometimes have to use our tools and physically make them go to jail. That sometimes doesn't look pretty, and we recognize that. But for the public, it's kind of traumatic to see that and not understanding what it is we go through. But policing requires that at all times officers must exercise control of a violent, disruptive, or resisting individual to make an arrest or to protect the officer or other officers or members of the public. I'm not going to read this verbatim because it's not going to serve you any benefit. We're going to highlight the parts that are going to matter most to you, and then after, if we want to follow up on something, we can. But let's keep rolling because it's a fairly long policy. Deadly force. This is what we're talking about. Deadly force. Law enforcement officers are authorized to use deadly force only when it is reasonable and necessary. That could be the policy in itself, right? When reasonable and necessary. That's the litmus test. Plain and simple. All members are charged with being familiar with Penal Law Article 35, which we just spoke about, and periodically reviewing the Article 35 to ensure strict compliance with New York State law, as it applies to the use of force. In Article 35, Section 3530 is provided below in here, which explains the justification. And the definition of, oh, I think I'm stuck on some tape here. I guess Lieutenant Donald, when he adjusted, did refold that. Good job. By legal definition, deadly physical force means physical force which, under circumstances in which it is used, is readily capable of causing death or serious physical injury. Justification in using physical force in an arrest to prevent an escape. Police or peace officers in the course of effecting or attempting to effect an arrest or preventing the attempt to prevent the escape from custody of a person may reasonably, or whom he or she reasonably believes to have committed an offense, may use physical force when and to the extent he or she reasonably, there's that word again, reasonably believes such to be necessary. And again, we're going through, it's explaining the charges, when you can use force, which level of force, and this is all in Article 35. You can pull it up on your phone, just Google New York State Penal Law. Because that's in here. We put the entire penal law into our policy. because our guys are bound by it. The fact that a police or peace officer is justified using deadly physical force under circumstances prescribed in paragraphs A and B of subdivision 1 does not constitute justification for reckless conduct by such police officer. If we're justified in discharging our firearm, we would be justified. However, discharging that firearm into a crowd of people and recklessly putting other people at risk, that's reckless, correct? So we would not be justified in that aspect. This here covers the sections where you can direct a third person to assist to the extent necessary by law, and it covers that. Again, that's penal law. Covers more on what it is they can and do when they're directed. Private person acting on his or her own, that covers a civilian. Again, it's the penal law, but it's in our policy, so we're going to breeze through that. Explains when you can defend yourself or herself or a third person what you reasonably believe to be the use or imminent use of deadly physical force. It's your perception. What do you reasonably believe is going to happen? Guarding prisoners, that covers the jail. We'll breeze through that. Here's something that stands out, hence why it's red. That's always a clue, and it's not on the test. However, reporting update, July 11th of 2019, Executive Law 837 requires each agency to report any occurrence in which a police officer or peace officer employs the use of force, as listed in the next slide. They were already being done, but this was more of a, instead of the FBI, this was a New York State thing. The executive order says, hey, you're going to tell everybody when these things happen. Also, they removed, previous to this, the governor had it reported in there, anytime you'd use a carotid restraint or a chokehold, you had to report it to the governor's office through DCJS. That was in the law. We didn't take that out. The governor just did in his new memo, but that was there, and it was a reportable incident. So we as police officers, if we used a carotid restraint, or we ended up having to use a chokehold in defense of ourselves, we had to report that like these other events. Use, deploy a chemical agent. The operation of a chemical agent against a person in a manner capable of causing physical injury. So if you use pepper spray, and it's in a manner to cause physical injury, you have to report that to DCJS. If you display, use, discharge a firearm, that's operating a firearm against a person in a manner capable of causing physical injury. So originally when it came out, it was if an officer was to simply draw his weapon, was that a reportable incident? Governor's office, DCJS, they came out. This is their newest update. This is the language they're using and require. Display uses, deploys an impact weapon or an electronic control weapon. The operation of an impact weapon or electronic control weapon against a person in a manner capable of causing physical injury. So if I basically draw any one of these tools off my belt, it's not reported. If I use it, it then becomes a reportable incident. And that's fairly simple. It's not a difficult task. But these things were already in place, it's just now it was laid out in a separate format to ensure compliance by the majority of the agencies. Conduct resulting in a death. Well, there's certainly going to be an inquiry from the district attorney's office, but they wanted this included with these others that we were going to call them and say, hey, we had an incident, somebody passed away from the incident. Serious bodily injury, creates or causes a substantial risk of death, unconsciousness, serious protracted disfigurement, protracted loss of impairment of the function of any bodily member, organ, or mental faculty. It's the seriousness of the damage to a person that you've dealt with. They're to be reported in our policy, and again, this is our policy. This is not a slide. Our policies have been broken up to slides, so this is how it reads to our people. And the reporting system is, they, the patrol sergeant, sent an email to the lieutenant and me, CC'd, and it says, reportable incident with the SJS number. That's how we can identify quickly and effectively that, okay, we had a reportable incident, we reviewed it immediately, we figured out what's going on with it, we report it to DCJS immediately. They ask pedigree of the individuals, they ask the officer's pedigree, the race, the age, all these things, they ask in these reportable incidents. Duty to intervene. This is interesting. We've had this. The duty to intervene is something that is necessary. And cops know that. But because there was some issue somewhere, they decided they need to put out a mandate that stated when a police officer sees another officer conducting conduct which they would believe to be criminal, and I can read it verbatim for you, when members observe another officer using force that he or she reasonably believes to be clearly beyond that which is objectively reasonable under the circumstances shall intercede to prevent the use of unreasonable force, if and when that officer has a realistic opportunity to prevent harm. If a member observes force that exceeds the degree of force that is objectively reasonable, the member is required to report it to its supervisor. It's common sense. But it's in our policy. It's highlighted in red because it's a new mandate that came out to require it to be there. But we've had that there.
I was going to say, it's not a reactionary piece, and I think that's important to bring up. The case that sparked the largest reason of why we are here right now, out in Minneapolis, obviously, with the kneeling on the neck, and all the video footage of officers standing by and watching this, and hey, maybe you should let him up. That's craziness. I mean, there's no maybe you should let him up. You have a duty to intervene, and I know when Mr. McGill started, he said this is control, specifically the law enforcement function. By mandate, yes, that's correct. However, you need to realize the overwhelming majority, if not all of these policies, are incorporated in the jail policy as well. We have had that in our jail policy for a decade and a half. And I have criminal cases where I have had people charged within the department for violation of this. We have disciplinary records that go back over a decade, where people know where they stand because of that. And they have to realize we are here to do a job and we are here to do it properly. And they all know that they have a duty to intervene and make sure that their colleagues, if they're over-aggressive, if things are out of control, if they see that they've gone beyond that threshold, to stop them. They're helping their colleague and they're helping themselves, they're helping the department. And that's something where I talked earlier about teach and preach. When you teach this, you have people read it, but you have to preach it. You have to routinely go in and remind people and let them know the importance of why we have this. That's what makes the difference.
Continuum of force. You guys have heard the continuum of force. And this lays out what is reasonable, what can be used. And continuum of force covers a whole list of things. And we're not going to read through this because I'd much rather explain it to you. If I deal in a situation like you saw in the video, had that guy not grabbed a gun, and I wanted him to come over, I could simply put my hand on his back and say, hey, you need to come over here. What if he complied? If he complied, I'd simply finish my interview and deal with it. What if he fights me? If he fights me, my verbal commands are no longer effective. So for me, I would move up to the next one. Use of hands, pressure points, OC, pepper spray. If you become combative and I'm trying to effect an arrest on you, it is appropriate and okay to use the least amount of force necessary to effect an arrest. If that is physically grabbing you because I'm larger than you and holding on your hand and saying you're now under arrest and you comply, I then get to de-escalate. And I get to take you into custody. That compliance. That part of the video that they had spoken about. But what happens is, what if this person does not comply and they start punching me? Well, you would move up to your next step. Use of hands, pressure points, OC, conducted electrical weapon, your taser. Because you're now fighting, one, for yourself, to defend yourself, two, trying to effect an arrest. Disengagement is a possibility. I teach defensive tactics. I teach firearms. I'm just trying to have a conversation with you and put it in. I can read the policy. Well, let's talk about this, right? We can do these things. But if you're punching me, I can punch you back. I can use what I need at that point, one step above, to effect that arrest. Then what if you immediately fall on the ground and comply? If you do that, then I must go back to de-escalation. I bring it down. I take you into custody if you're compliant. That is what is supposed to happen. But if the person you're trying to arrest keeps escalating and going up and then goes for a weapon, you too must meet that force at the level, if not the next level above, in order to protect yourself or a third person. You don't get a right, as it's written in the law, to fight the police officer. Everybody gets choices along the way. Your first choice is simply compliance. If I come up to you on the side of the road, and I pull you over and I ask you to step out of the car, you step out of the car. We have a conversation. You get back in the car, you move on your way. Or if I deal with you at a domestic and I ask you to come over here, then you come over here, we talk. If I have to take you under arrest, hey, give me a finger, put your hand behind your back, you're under arrest. You have a choice. You have a choice to comply, and then I get to just use verbal commands. That's it, done and over. What happens, though, is those people sometimes don't choose that. They feel like it's appropriate to argue on the side of the road, argue in the house, fight the police, and decide that they don't need to comply because they feel they're right. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Because sometimes you feel like you're right. Sometimes you're not right. Nobody likes being arrested. I've been arrested. I've gone to jail. I know what it's like. But the difference is you have a choice to comply. And when you're using force, you have to use the appropriate level of force. That's always dictated by the person you're dealing with. And if that person chooses to comply at any step of this, you simply de-escalate. If that person is compliant up until you're about to handcuff them, and then they try to punch you in the face and start fighting you, well, you certainly can't de-escalate from there. One, because you're going to get hurt. Two, you're going to have other problems. So then you have to escalate it in order to control. Because unfortunately, society has chosen police officers. And they hire police officers, they say, we have rules. We want people to abide by the societal rules, and we have enforcement, which is police. And when you're out fighting people, causing damage, acting in a way that makes society uncomfortable, we have to go, and we have to determine what it is. So we don't get to walk away. There's no expectation of retreat for police officers. There's a tactical retreat, which is appropriate to determine if there's other resources you can use, other tools. But in the end, compliance is the key. So do you guys understand that whole theory of moving up and down that scale? Because that's kind of critical. You really have to understand that in order to do what it is you're trying to do. You have to understand that those have a place. And every police officer has to understand that they can move from jump to jump, depending on what it is they're facing. Because in that video, he didn't leave a lot of room. The one guy that came up and he had his weapon out, and the guy was approaching and approaching. What if the guy immediately complied, got on his hands and knees? He would have never shot him. Because he could have de-escalated. That guy could have complied at the beginning, listened to him, could have complied when he pulled the gun, could have complied at every step of the way. He failed to do that, which escalated up the situation. Boss looks like he's about ready to jump out of something.
Well, this is not new. This has been in law enforcement for decades, the Matrix. If you recall at the very beginning, the Marvin Gaye background music that we were playing, talked about what's been going on and talked a little bit about some of the violence issues. We're still faced with these things today. What is different today that we have to deal with, along with this force, and why the Major was saying we have to go up and down on that force at times, is the behavioral health issues that we've been encountering, like we have never seen before. When you have experts in this field sit there and say, I don't know what these things are. I don't know what's going on. Now, it's easy for us to sit here and say, that's an excuse. They're hiding behind that. I can tell you firsthand, there are people that are smart enough to do that, but there are also people that have absolutely no clue what they're doing. That makes law enforcement even that much more challenging. Because now we have to discern, in a matter of seconds, what's the case with this person? Do they have behavioral health issues that we need to be able to quickly try and identify? And we're lucky, we do have good resources in Clinton County with Rachel. She's very good. She's assisted us in a couple times when we've gone out on some critical cases to talk about de-escalation prior to going to these incidents, so our guys can be in tune and very familiar with it. Teach and preach. You can teach them, but you got to preach to them as well, over and over. With the behavioral health problems that we are seeing now, unlike any other. And thanks to our lovely friend that came in 2020, COVID-19, that decides, okay, we're gonna add a whole new component to this. I don't think you can talk to any type of a doctor that will not tell you, oh yeah, I've seen an increase in concerns and in patients that I've had with, various issues. Could be physical, could be emotional. That's why I like the term behavioral health, because that's exactly what it is. It's a health condition that can affect the way that you're behaving, the way you're conducting yourself. That's getting more and more difficult to understand. Now, I don't know how many degrees you have to get to that level, but at our level, people are just trying to figure out, okay, who's right and who's wrong, and you throw all these complex mixes into it, creates even more of a challenge. So that's something that we have to deal with, and we have to understand that matrix for the use of force to be able to go down, up, and you can jump. You don't have to go from the first line to the second line. It may jump from the first to the fourth, and then back from the fourth to the second. Depending upon the situation, that law enforcement member has to make their own assessment. What level of force do I have to use? Not always an easy thing to do.
So this changed. This is new. Remember that reportable incident where we discussed the carotid restraint, the neck, and then the chokehold? This came out in a new law that states any maneuver with intent to impede the normal breathing or circulation of blood of another person by applying pressure to the throat, neck, or covering the nose or mouth of another person is prohibited by New York State Penal Law 121.13a, aggravated strangulation. That is if you were a police officer.
So, same if you're a civilian?
No, it's not. DA, is it the same if you're a civilian? No, it's not. It's actually
If you're arrested for a felony, if you're a cop,
if you're a cop and you do that, it's a felony. If you're a civilian and you do it, it's only a misdemeanor. Why is this important? Well, it's important because somebody did something they were not trained to do. Somebody did something they were not supposed to do. Somebody did not use reasonable force. And it's always in law enforcement. You never want to be the guy that creates case law. Somebody did something so horrific and didn't pay attention, or for whatever reason, this is now a law. Which means, if I was to ever use a carotid restraint or a chokehold in the defense of my life, I would be charged with this section. There's no affirmative defense for that, which means there's no exemption from me being charged because I was using it to defend myself. In fact, that law states that I'm a police officer, I should be charged with that. Now, I don't know why it is my uniform means that I should be charged differently than you in your street clothes, but it does, and that's okay. But it also means that I technically cannot defend myself. Now, if you take my gun, you take my knife, and you're now bashing my head in with a rock, I have to make a choice. I either not defend my life because I'm going to be charged with this, or I use whatever I need to defend myself. I don't get an affirmative defense, but I might be able to justify it through the court system after I'm charged, and it won't be by Mr. Wiley's office anymore, because now the governor, and correct me if I'm wrong, now has a special prosecutor that's going to come up and decide what goes on with me. I have to defend myself in court because I had to make a decision to either use this move or die. Because somebody did not use reasonable force and was not reasonably objective. We go.
I guess while we're at that point, is there anybody who would like to sign up for the next police exam?
Anybody?
I just want to quickly read something, and it's in the manual. I'm trying to relate some of this information to the stuff that was in the governor's guidance book. But I found it somewhat odd, I guess, in looking at this and going over this particular slide today. That says, and this is quote from the governor, no one in this state should ever feel intimidated or threatened because of who they are or how they look. I don't know, but I think if you ask some of the police officers that are out there in some of these communities today, and I have a nephew who's on the NYPD, and he will tell you, yes, I feel threatened and I am intimidated. I am afraid to go out and do my job. That's a sad state of affair. We need to turn that platform around a little bit and go back to the laws that we've had for decades that work, but we have to understand them and properly educate people on them in compliance, compliance, compliance. It may be wrong in what that law enforcement member is telling you to do. I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I have to put my hands on the wheel? Why should I have to stand here and wait for you? Time to ask the question probably is after. It's not during an escalated event when things are very tense. Let it calm down a little bit. We need to get our society back to the point where they understand that. I think most people in this room probably remember a point in time where your own families told you that. Do what your teacher tells you. Listen to the principal. If a police officer stops, don't be rude, don't be disrespectful. We've kind of lost that whole background now. That's not even part of the discussion. Part of the discussion is how wrong they are and how they have become the enemy. And I think we need to really take a look at that and say, it is a small percentage, but we're creating a bigger issue with that, and we can resolve some of these things. I'm not going to get into individual cases, but I found that quite interesting that the governor made that quotation that nobody in the state of New York should feel intimidated, when in fact, some of these things that are being created are causing some problems and causing some concerns for certain professions.
So this is now in our policy. To be clear, our use of force policy, verbatim, this is how it's wrote in our policy. Because the governor has put it out, and we need to be accredited and we need to be compliant. And our people know this was a hot button issue amongst law enforcement. We understand. We're not impressed with this, but we understand. So we will comply. This is the duties of the member, what they must do, the reporting forms. Now you know what we have to do for DCJS. We have to send down that information. We have to tell them, you know, the pedigree of every person, their race, their age, the race of the officer, the age of the officer, all that good stuff. And then we need to send a DCJS. And then we have the internal stuff. And if it comes to a case that's got to go to Mr. Wiley's office, we have to make sure it actually looks really cute. And we got to make sure it's packaged up properly. But we have so much we have to do in order to report these. It explains what the officer has to do, the fact that if there's any injury to a person that they dealt with, they have to bring to the hospital, even if they refuse. If we arrest somebody and they're injured, they're like, oh, I don't need the ambulance, I don't need a doctor. Yeah, that's cool. We can appreciate that. But we are going to bring them to the hospital, and it's going to be witnessed by a nurse and a doctor that he's refusing care and treatment. I don't need Mr. Martineau calling up saying, hey, what are you guys doing? We want to be above board with what it is we do. And it goes through what our patrol supervisors need to do, the administrative office, what they need to do to review all the reports. This, again, is our policy, internal policy on use of force. And if you guys ever want to review it in its entirety, let me know after. The most important things that are up there are the ones that are highlighted in red, because that's what came out in Executive Order 203 and the other memos that came out from DCJS requiring changes to our policies. But it goes back to those reasonable use. If an officer is reasonable and escalates and de-escalates as needed, things should be okay. But we have to comply with all these things, and we have because we're about 4 policies away from our accreditation review, which means all of our policies are in line with the governor's office and DCJS. That is our entire use of force policy. It meets the mandate of New York State as well as the DCJS for accreditation purposes. Our policies is and has been balanced with the safety of the men and women of this agency dealing with the criminal element in society as a whole. So, we're going to play something next here, but I need to prep it real quick. In order to make sure that you guys get the full, yeah. But I want to make sure that the volume is up where it needs to be, because at the end of the video, I'm going to explain to these people. I don't hope there's...
It's an audience interaction video, so those of you that fell asleep, wake up. Seriously, we're going to want you to take a look at this and you'll get some directions in a moment, but just to give you a better flavor for how decisions have to be made and how things have to be done, and how little time you have to do that. It's pretty interesting to see. It can be a lot.
So this video is Deputy Dinkheller, is his last name. Thinking of your video you saw before where the officer spoke to the individual and offered him to be compliant and take him into custody, and then he chose not to, and he got shot. Both of them got shot. Because there's a certain level of somebody going for a vehicle, going for a weapon, that you look at and you're like, well, he should have never done that. Okay. I wait for all the facts. I'm asking you guys to do the same thing because this video is going to showcase something that didn't go well. Listen to the end of it. It's going to be hard. Anybody squeamish? Okay. The man attacked him on the road. He didn't physically fight him. Didn't have the tools to use. Didn't shoot him. Saw him go to his truck, grab a rifle. He didn't tell me he had a rifle in the car. What if he did? There was a recent shooting where somebody said they were going to get a gun. He went and got a rifle. Was loading it, and the officer's telling him to stop. Did you shot him? Mr. Murchison? Who are you? You've been a cop. You don't have to answer, but Mr. Rosenquist, let me put you on the spot, man.
Yeah.
Right?
Good stuff, yeah.
Okay. The point is, guys, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. We understand it's easy to make police out to be the bad guys, but this is what we know is out there. And we're talking about our little community. I have two guys that are sitting in here that know what goes on in this little community. I know what goes on in this community. Sadly and positively for you, you may not know what goes on in this community. It's easy to vilify the police because our job sometimes looks dirty. And it looks harsh when we physically have to grab somebody and make them comply with the rules of law. You saw the other video where the protester that went into the news thing? That dude, absolutely love that guy. To have the courage to go through that and to realize, hey, you know what? This maybe isn't so easy. This here, you listen to a guy die because he didn't want to do anything wrong to that person. I get it. You know, we understand right now, we look like we're the bad guys. You know, 9/11, September 11th, a lot of cops died that day. You know, because they were heroes. And then something happened. You know, bad people make bad choices. Bad people fill every rank of every job and career field. Bad people manage to get into uniform. I don't want to call them cops, right? Because they're bad people. And they did bad things, which brings us to the point now to where society feels like they don't trust police. Paul Harvey, a long time ago, did something called The Policeman. Look it up on YouTube. It's great. I have a Superman picture on my wall in my office because I get up every day and I want to save the world. Sheriff jokes he didn't want it to look like a doorman. Well, I'm sorry. Superman's got to stay. Because he stands for hope, the ability to do something, the ability to save the world. This cop was out doing his job, probably kissed his kids goodbye that morning, and got murdered on the side of the road. In theory, he probably should have engaged that guy, like many of you, to make sure he goes home. Two cops were sitting in their car in Los Angeles 2 days ago, 3 days ago, sitting there. Somebody snuck up and shot them in the face. Social media says, we don't know the whole story. Wait a minute. We were just told that a cop shooting somebody is wrong no matter what. But then we said, these two cops getting shot in the face, there's people saying you don't know the whole story. When society is okay to where you can walk up and shoot two cops sitting in their car, and your first response is, oh, we don't know the whole story, society has issues and is ill. And we, and you, the politicians and lawmakers, and citizens, you have a voice. Some of you people, I don't know where you're from. I'm glad you're here. We're not the enemy. We want you to come talk to us. We want you to know who we are. We want you to know that we have a job to do, And we do it because we care. We live in the same community. We have a job to do. We're not the enemy. Boss?
You know, we really promised that tonight we weren't going to get into individual cases that brought us here, and I really don't want to get into that, but we wanted to show you a little bit of what it's like to have to make some of these tough decisions, but also how important it is to do several things for your department to keep them healthy and to keep them functioning the way that they need to in the community. And that is having good, sound policies, which is something that we've worked on, something that we've talked about. I've talked with my patrol chief ever since I've been sheriff. I talked with the jail administrator ever since I've been sheriff. We need to make sure that we have good, sound policies to help guide our people, to help protect our people, because that's what they do. We need to teach them the policies, and then we need to preach about the highlights and the important things of those policies. And we do that routinely. In the governor's guidance handbook, he talks an awful lot about community involvement, having your officers involved in things. He came up with a great idea that, you know, maybe even having a police department starting the PAL football league. Been there, done that. 1990. Did it and ran it with my partner Kurt Tobrock for a decade and a half. Great program. We do a lot of community interaction, a lot of community involvement for several reasons. And I have some guys here tonight. I don't know about them, but I think it's fun. I think it's really cool to be able to take these kids shopping and to look at a 5th or 6th grade student and have them say, oh, Deputy, do you think instead of spending all this money on me, can I get my mom something? So don't tell me there's no good in the world. And for us to be able to see that little bit of good when every single day we deal with the negative, negative, negative. People don't call us up and say, hey, good morning, Sheriff's Department. How's it going down there? You having a good day today? You know, then it's followed up with, there's a bomb in such and such a building. I mean, it's crazy, day in and day out. So for us to be engaged in these community programs is fun, it's refreshing, it's good for our behavioral health. Everybody in here, I'm sure, has, you know a police officer, you live next to a police officer, maybe related to a police officer. Cops usually have a different sense of humor. That's our protective mechanism. Rochelle knows what I'm talking about. But that is our protective mechanism. You can't deal with people's problems day in and day out to that extreme and sit here and think that you're going to be a typically healthy person. That compounds everything we talked about earlier, makes it more difficult. That's why it is my job, my responsibility, and my obligation to make sure that our team is working at creating the best policies we can to provide the best environment for our community. I stand by that, and if there's ways that we can improve it, things that we can make better, I will do that. If it's something that's going to jeopardize the safety and well-being of my members, I will not do that. Many, many days we have a thankless job, and I'm grateful for the guys, for the men and the women that go out there every single day, and don't forget in the jail, that protect the public, and that try and treat people as humanely as possible. And for very little reward, I'll add. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that and that I acknowledge that. And the least I can do is provide them with the tools and provide them with the policies to be able to protect themselves and do their job. The whole concept of defunding the police, one of the most ridiculous things I've heard of. Careers in Law Enforcement. There's a program, 1996, 97, and 98, Governor Pataki funded the program. Great program. 14-week curriculum. High school students, they came down to the basement of the Plattsburgh Police Department. I instructed them about every single branch of law enforcement that there is. We had Border Patrol agents come in, we had canine divisions, helicopter pilots. All these different people in law enforcement would come in and talk to the high school students about what a career in law enforcement was like. What did that do? It was a brilliant program. Gave them an interest in a job field, first of all, but also broke down those barriers. Well, we never see those green uniforms. What's up with a green uniform? So now they understand why they have a green uniform. Okay, that's the guys from up along the border. Well, how come you're different than the blue uniforms? Those are the customs agents that you're going to see up, and this is what they do. They have a full understanding and respect for what our system is about. Why don't we bring those programs back? We want to talk about defunding the police. We want to talk about demilitarizing the police, taking tools away from them? Why don't we bring the positive programs that we know have positive impacts on the youth in our community and can shape a better society for us? The DARE program, what's better than having a uniformed officer sit down on a carpeted floor with third, fourth graders and read a really cool story and talk about self-esteem and talk a little bit about their job so that they understand we're not the bad guys. Those are all things that we have proven in the city of Plattsburgh, in this community, that worked. And I can sit here and I can tell you, and I can share hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories with you. When I have a young man that comes up to me who's 34 years old and he comes running across the mall when my wife and I are walking and just about jumps in my arms, "Coach, how are you?" Greatest moment in your life, next to the birth of your own kids. It's absolutely spectacular. And those are proud moments. Those are things that our law enforcement agencies need to do. They need to be ingrained in the growth of our community if we're going to have respect and we're going to have effectiveness. There are members on this committee themselves that I've learned an awful lot from. Pretty much everybody that's sitting out there. And this man right here, who's been the only one, him and the DA, that have really kept their mask on, so that's kind of cool. But Dave Murchison has taught me an awful lot. He's taught me how to look through eyes that I don't have. We need resources like that. We need people in the community that care and that aren't just out there to cry and make an excuse and protest because we want to protest. We need people that can say, you know, did you ever think about this? You know, there's a lot of discussions that are being had out there in the community that are going to be beneficial, that are going to help us grow. Are we going to be changing policies? Well, I want to see what you folks have to say. If you see anything that really is striking after we've gotten done this presentation. But I think when you look at that booklet that the governor put together and you read it, you look at our policies, the programs, the way we've ingrained ourselves into the community, the things that we do, something so simple as going to every single town and village in this county and leading their parade, because you're proud to be there. And then we go and we walk the field days and we talk to the people. We can tell you who's got the best corn chili, who's got the best clam chowder, who's got the best Michigan sauce. It's great, it's enjoyable, it's a wonderful community. But those are the things that make it wonderful, and if you're not part of it, how can you really have a full understanding and appreciation for what's going on in the community? So I think we've covered those grounds quite well. I know you said that we weren't going to do a question and answer time right now, but I hope we covered what you needed to have covered. There are policies governing just about anything that you could possibly imagine. We look at policies as a tool. We look at policies as an ability to protect our people and give some guidance to be able to provide the best service to our community to create the safest environment. And I would challenge every police department across the country to do the same thing. I'm sure there are many out there that have better programs than we do. I'd like to see them. I'm always interested in looking at something new, but I would also put our policies in our department up against any department in the country. With that, I have nothing else.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And he did a good job too.
Thank you, sir.
Are any questions from the panel with regard to the presentation? Well, it looks to me like the next step is to have a public hearing on issues that are presented both by the governor's memo and issues that anybody wants to raise. I didn't do it tonight because I felt it would be longer. We didn't need to have it any longer than it already is. And maybe shooting my mouth off extends even further. But in any event, I think the plan will be to schedule another session in a week or two, and back here, and hopefully we can get some publicity as to where it is, because I know 130 Arizona is not on the main drag of the county. So that's maybe one of the problems why we have such a late attendance tonight. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has any questions, or wherever we get in touch, let's do a date and time and place. Okay?
I would
just if I can,
You
on
may.
top of that, if the committee has received a copy
Yes.
of this, take a look through it and read it, and just try and visualize what's being said here, and what we've presented, and what you're familiar with our department and what we do. Because it mirrors an awful lot of it, as it should, because there's some good information here. It's well put together, it's well thought out, but again, agencies, law enforcement agencies have to be ingrained in the community in multiple facets. That's the only way you're going to get the trust, the respect, and most importantly, the partnership. And that's in our mission statement, and that's something we've prided ourselves in, that we have the best partnership in the state of New York, and I'll take it across the country, with our community and our department, because we get a lot of good, positive information from people that call us up. If you want, at any point in time, you're welcome to come to the department, and I'll be glad to show you the folders that we have of thank you letters, but I still think it's comical when I review some of them. I've never thought in my wildest dreams that I would get a thank you card from people who got a speeding ticket. Pretty interesting. Thank you for your attention, thank you for attending this evening, and thank you, sir, for putting this together.
Thank you. Stay tuned, I guess is the best thing to say. You bet. Thank you.